internet, and welcome back to another episode of Meet La Prensa. Viewer, if you like what you see here, if you find value, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. So today we have a really special guest, a legend, really, somebody who I've been a fan of their work for a really long time. And Billy Corben is a director. Billy Corben directed Cocaine Cowboys. He directed the latest 537 Votes on HBO. Viewer, if you haven't seen these, we'll leave links to them right here in the comments so you can get to them right away, because you got to watch these if you haven't seen them already. And if you have seen them already, you got to watch them again, because there's so much that you learn every time that you watch a film by Billy Corben. It's super well researched. The research, I think, is one of the things. Obviously, the editing is phenomenal, but the research and the meticulous nature of that research, it's bar none. So Billy has had some trouble, basically, with a Miami City commissioner named Joe Carollo, who's a Miami Cuban, who, you know, he basically has gone on some anti-Semitic tirades against Billy, and he's done these things in the public forum of the Miami City Council. So we here at Meet La Prensa, as we stated in previous episodes with Jordan Levin, we're firmly committed to stamping out anti-Semitism anywhere we see it, especially within our own community. So this is sort of like, you know, one of the reasons why we think it's so important to continue this conversation. Now, Billy, thank you so much for joining Meet La Prensa. It's an honor to have you here, sir. My first question, I guess, has to be, like, Joe Carollo, how did you guys meet, and what is this guy's problem?
Well, Joe Carollo has been in Miami politics for about 40 some odd years now. This is a community that, like many communities, that where politics and the public sector become a hereditary kind of business, where siblings and spouses and offspring tend to go into the family business, which unfortunately in many cases is not a virtuous one. They're not interested in public service per se, but they're interested in corruption, in abuse of power, in feeding at the public trough. Once you taste that public money, I got to tell you, it is more addictive than crack cocaine. I mean, and especially in Miami-Dade County, where in addition to county government, we have 34 municipalities within the county. So that's 34 villages, cities, incorporated areas that have their own mayors, that have their own governments, many of which have their own police departments. And that means their own government agencies, their own pensions, their own salaries, their own contracting. And what is that? I mean, that is just, it's rainmaking. And so what you have is, in many of these municipalities, the largest of which and most famous of which is City of Miami, you have lobbyists and police unions and politicians and lawyers and construction companies and contractors who basically make it their fiefdom. It's like Game of Thrones in paradise with iguanas instead of dragons. You know, that's Miami. And so, and the city of Miami, by the way, the county of Miami-Dade has a $9+ billion annual budget. The city of Miami has a $1.1 billion annual budget, and there's 33 more of these municipalities. I'd say arguably another one of the most famous is the city of Miami Beach. And let me tell you right now that as you and I sit here and have this conversation today, in our flagship namesake cities in Miami-Dade County, Miami and Miami Beach, the current mayors are both second-generation mayors. They are both the sons. They're both the sons of past mayors. I mean, what kind of, I mean, like, that's not how we should operate in a large, diverse, sophisticated community like this. But this is what happens. We get essentially, you've heard of New York and their 5 families, you know, the mob families. We have families like that in Miami. These are essentially political dynasties. They're political crime families that abuse the public trust and steal our money for generations and generations. And Joe Carollo is just one of those figures. He was our Donald Trump before there was a Donald Trump. He was a figure that thrives on communist conspiracy theories, on demagoguery. You know, everybody's a Marxist, everybody's a socialist if you disagree with his form of tin pot dictatorship. And that's ultimately what he is. He's a wannabe tin pot dictator. And his last foray into politics, which incidentally, in 1996, he became the unelected mayor of Miami. What do I mean by that?
Yeah.
He lost the election. He lost the election unequivocally, and a judge found that there was substantial voter fraud, including dead people, mind you, that voted, which is true. We have some dead super voters in Miami that vote in every election back in those days. And so what the judge did was, instead of ordering a new election, the judge basically said, I'm throwing out these votes and installing the loser as the winner. And Joe Carollo became the mayor of the city of Miami. And he was in 2001, he was arrested for domestic violence in a violent spat with his now ex-wife, in which his 10-year-old daughter frantically dialed 911 and hysterically begged the police to come because, quote, my dad's hurting my mom, in a devastating 911 recording.
Oh, my dad's hurting my mom.
What happened?
Oh, my dad's hurting my mom.
What's your address?
In her house.
Give me your address, ma'am.
Please come now, please.
You home with any weapons, a gun or knife, anything?
I don't know. No, he doesn't have it.
Give me your last.
Come.
The scared voice of Joe and Madi Carollo's 7-year-old daughter brought police to the Coconut Grove home just after 7 o'clock Wednesday morning. Police say the mayor struck his wife in the face in an early morning argument.
Mrs. Carollo told us that she was struck in the head with a small terracotta tea container.
Carollo's wife, Maria, had a golf ball-sized lump on the left side of her head.
The mayor was booked into county jail. And for tonight, the mayor of Miami is being treated just like any other accused domestic offender.
And so he was essentially humiliated out of office at that time. And now, 20 years later, has resurfaced as not only a city commissioner, but the de facto strong mayor of Miami. He is the most powerful political figure in the city of Miami today, essentially controls the city manager, the city attorney, the police chief, and a $1.1 billion budget. Incidentally, the police department and the code enforcement he uses as his own personal Tonton Macoute to target private businesses who disagree with him politically. So this is a very dangerous very well. He sends code enforcement and the police to falsely cite these legally operating businesses to try to put them out of business and discourage them from doing business in the city of Miami. To be perfectly honest, right now, with the regime currently in power, Francis Suarez, Joe Carollo, Manny Reyes, Ken Russell, Jeffrey Watson, Alex Diaz de la Portilla, Art Noriega, the mayor, Victoria Mendez, the city attorney, you'd be better off investing in Caracas. There's a more stable regime there than there is in the city of Miami right now.
So you mentioned this crime family type nature of the Miami political, like hereditary class of politician. Now, Ivan surfaced, he found a video of them talking about you behind your back at another city council meeting. I believe Ivan said it was on March 11th.
Billy Corben.
Corbin.
No. His real name is Billy Cohen. Oh, wow. I don't think he likes his last name, so he uses Corbin. You're right. So maybe if I go Friday, I'm sure he's going to be there, and we could get in the same car and bond again together. Yeah.
6 feet apart.
Yeah. That should be a plan. I'll bring the fish.
And I'll bring the wrapper.
They actually said that, you know, they basically made a reference to the Godfather scene where they talk about Luca Brasi will sleep with the fishes. They make it basically like, you know, and just so the viewer knows, we have tweeted at Joe Carollo to come on this show to answer for the anti-Semitic comments that he made to you. But also we want him to answer is like, was that a threat? Was that a threat on your life? And Billy, are you afraid for your life? Because $1.3 billion is a lot of money. You can do a lot of damage to people with that kind of dough.
What the hell is this?
That's a Sicilian message. It means Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
Well, first of all, they mention sleeping with the fishes in the context of the movie Goodfellas. And of course, that's an incorrect reference. Remember, there's no IQ test to run for office. If there was, there would just be nobody in office in Miami. But these are not sophisticated people. Joe Carollo is a bully. He beats up on women, He beats up physically, beats up on women.
Wow.
And he beats up on people. He punches down, is what he does. I choose to punch up.
Sounds like a coward.
He's a coward. He's a coward and he's a bully. And the best thing you can do to a coward and a bully is you give him a metaphoric, a figurative shove back on the playground, and then they leave you alone. Needless to say, I haven't heard much from him since my my first and only appearance at the city commission meeting, at the risk of getting ahead of ourselves. But yeah, this is a guy who is constantly looking for villains,
right.
looking for enemies, looking for comunista, looking for, socialists, and when of course all of that is just classic demagoguery and to be perfectly candid, horse shit. Let's be very straight. You're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your facts. The fact is there is no communist threat to democracy in this country. The single greatest threat to democracy in this country, as identified by our, by the FBI and our law enforcement agencies, is fanatical right-wing extremism and violence, as evidenced most vividly on January 6th in Washington, D.C. But as I often say, the Miami of today is the America of tomorrow. And so we were acutely aware of the threat of right-wing terrorism. Why? Because in Miami, from the 1960s through the 1990s and even into the early zeros, Miami was the domestic terrorism capital of the United States. We had over 150 incidents of bombings, hijackings, shoulder-launched missile attacks in and around South Florida, mostly carried out by anti-Castro exiles. And what this violence was intended to do was not, obviously it wasn't blowing up a cigar factory in Miami doesn't dethrone Castro. Okay, so obviously that was blowing the legs off of a radio show host, Emilio Milian, does not defeat Castro. But what it does is it stifles dissent and it silences critics and people who might say, listen, our current strategy with Cuba isn't working. Maybe we need to change things up a little bit. And they blow your fucking legs off. That was something that happened. And so that style, essentially, that sort of terror, of political terrorism and stifling dissent through political terrorism and bullying and intimidation and threats and bombings was a very real thing in Miami. We were acutely aware of that from generations ago. And second of all, there is no threat to capitalism through socialism. There is no threat whatsoever. The greatest threat to capitalism and the free market is cronyism and corruption. Okay, it's when you
I couldn't agree more.
Right, that's what perverts the free market system and destroys capitalism, is cronyism and corruption. And by the way, that comes in all forms of government. Okay, it comes in, it comes in dictatorships, it comes in capitalists or democracies. But the bottom line is socialism is not the threat. Cronyism and corruption is the threat. That's what perverts and ultimately destroys when you have to be somebody's cousin or somebody's nephew or somebody's uncle to get a contract, and you have to pay off our politicians. And again, Miami is the living proof. We had a bridge that collapsed that was built by a politically connected, in fact, Representative Carlos Jimenez's wife's cousin owned the company, majorly connected to Senator Rick Scott, Senator Marco Rubio, Representative Mario Diaz-Balart, even Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So there's enough to go around. This isn't just a Republican thing. They know you gotta butter both sides of the tostada. You know what I mean? You got a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, if you're going to be able to get away with crushing 6 people to death in a bridge collapse. That's how bad cronyism and corruption has become in Miami. Our infrastructure is literally collapsing and crushing people to death. People talk about, in Mexico, there was a bridge collapse, the train collapse. That happened in Miami years ago. 6 people were crushed to death, not because of just an accident, but because of corruption, cronyism, and criminal negligence, and no one has been held accountable. So again, these lies about communism and socialism, this gets politicians and has gotten politicians in Miami elected for decades. And this is something that has been exported really out of Miami, particularly to the Republican Party at large. You mentioned our documentary on HBO Max, 537 votes. Fernanda Mondi says in there that the Republicans were so quick and so smart to exploit the generational trauma of the Cuba issue by weaponizing the C word, communist. And that's, if you listen to Spanish language radio to this day, or the Spanish media, everything is comunista, comunista. It's filled with propaganda, demagoguery, anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, and really, again, it's the exploitation of generational trauma is what we're talking about. Because make no mistake, Fidel Castro was a fucking tyrant. Okay, again, let's have a set of facts we can all agree on. But tyrants, dictators, come in all guises. It's not just communists or capitalists or you can have as long as you're, for example, Batista, he let people keep their property, right? He let people have some economic freedom. That's why
the former
you never
dictator
hear
of Cuba.
about people here of Cuba, right? Who took over by military coup. He killed tens of thousands of people. He dissolved the constitution and political parties. He jailed his opponents and political dissidents,
including Fidel Castro, right?
Keep private property,
right?
Including Fidel Castro, yeah, who took to the hills and became a became a guerrilla, essentially a guerrilla warfare against this military dictator. But the bottom line is, whether you're peddling, these aren't strong men; these are con men. Okay, right. Trump isn't a strong man; he's a con man. Fidel Castro wasn't a strong man; he was a con man and a bully. Okay, he was. Let's be real. Cubans fled their country because they were fooled by a con man Russian puppet who turned out to be an authoritarian who seized all power, wealth, and property for himself and his family and his cronies. How is that any different from Trump? There's been a lot of talk about how the inability of people to identify authoritarians. Why can't people, for example, see the commonality in Trump and Fidel Castro and other dictators? Communism isn't the common ground there. That's all just part of the bullshit pitch from these con men. Trump was peddling capitalism, but that wasn't capitalism. That was cronyism and corruption. Same thing with Fidel Castro. Communism, that wasn't communism. That was corruption and cronyism and authoritarianism. And here's the issue. This is not unique to Miami. Look, 70 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. Were enticed by this strongman. What people have talked a lot about is about the inability of people to identify authoritarians. But I think that's the wrong issue. The issue is, why do people gravitate toward authoritarians and authoritarianism? I think they identify it. I think they see it, but I think they like it. And that's not unique. This is not about Cubans or Venezuelans this is about people who are gravitating. Because listen, there is the people who have been held hostage in Miami most dramatically by the right-wing terrorism and demagoguery and suppression of opinions have been Cuban Americans. You have third and fourth generation Cuban Americans born in this community who sit at a multi-generational dinner table day in and day out, night in and night out, who they're either brainwashed by their older family members through lies and demagoguery, or their opinion is oppressed. They don't feel safe or comfortable expressing their opinion, which is not okay in this country. The whole point of the gift of democracy, the gift of freedom, is supposed to be that we're here to disagree, and we're here to speak truth to power, and we're here to call out corruption and fuckery when we see it. So to that end, I'm not afraid, because this is what we're supposed to do here. And whether you're a Cuban American, whether you're a Jewish American, whether you're an African American, we're supposed to be able to punch up metaphorically, speak truth
No,
to
yeah.
power, engage in the First Amendment, engage with our government, and peacefully protest said government.
Well, let me just say thank you for punching up. I couldn't agree more. Too often you get these demagogues. Too often you get people who get a little bit of power, expand their power just by punching down to the amusement of, the peanut gallery. I guess, like, before we get too far ahead, before we get into this March 24th meeting, when did you first meet Joe Carollo? You obviously, been in Miami for a long time. When did he first pop up on your radar? Is he somebody who's always been there? Is he like, is he like the palm trees, or does he come with the, is he like, does the furniture come with the studio kind of thing? Like, what is Joe Carollo to you, and how did this relate? Because it sounds to me like he talks about, Billy, you were in my office, blah, blah, blah. We were laughing. And I don't know if that's true or not, but he's definitely like somebody who's basically trying to tell an audience that's watching this Miami City Council meeting on the 24th, yo, I know this guy, is that true? Do you and Joe Carollo know each other?
I met Joe Carollo once in person that I can recall. To answer the first part of your question, I've certainly been aware of him for the better part of my life, unfortunately, because, as I said, he has been a character here in politics for far too long. This is a man who was forced to resign from the Miami-Dade Police Department before they fired him because he put a Ku Klux Klan parody ad into the mailboxes of all of his fellow officers, including the African-American officers, who were quite offended by it. And he received a stern write-up and was forced to resign because they were recommended firing him. Everybody always says, how the hell do you get fired from the Miami-Dade Police Department? Ask Joe Carollo. He knows. He was right there. This is a guy who campaigned for George Wallace, a segregationist, for president. This is what Donald Trump might call a bad hombre, Joe Carollo. So I'm aware of him for far too long, unfortunately. But personally, I only remember meeting him once. I actually was in his office, as he accurately states, at City Hall, meeting with a guy who was there as a legislative aide, who I had gotten to know, and he invited me. I was attending a city commission meeting, and this legislative aide invited me into the office while the meeting was occurring, while Carollo was on the dais at the time. The meeting was in session. So I'm in the office talking to this guy, and in a back office too, not like Commissioner Carollo's office, like a back office, like an office within the office kind of a thing. And I think Joe Carollo heard that I was there in the office, and he comes into this internal office while I'm sitting there, sits down, and proceeds to hold court. Now, for somebody like me who grew up in Miami with this payaso, this to me is hilarious. So you're damn right I was laughing. The guy is a nut. He's just and of course contains a lot of Miami history, of which I'm incredibly intrigued in and interested in. And so he was sitting right there just holding court. And so I just sat there kind of watching the Joe Carollo show, not one-on-one. There was other people in the office, but I got a private show, if you will, outside the dais. So yeah, I was laughing. He's a pretty absurd, comical figure. Listen, he's a dangerous figure. He's a demagogue. But I'm here having this meeting with another person, and in walks the commissioner. And so, like I said, I got a private show. And so that was the only time. I don't know how long I was stuck in there, for 20 minutes, half hour, whatever, until I finally, I don't know if I excused myself or how I escaped. But it was a pretty amusing display. He says some pretty outlandish things, even in private. So for me, it was certainly it was an impromptu event. But it was certainly amusing. And again, as someone who is not just a citizen of Miami, but a student of Miami, and arguably a historian of Miami, this was a very unique accidental opportunity. So that event that event did take place. It did not seem to be the ideal occasion in which to discuss his domestic violence. And he seems to throw it out there as if that would have, like, I should have talked to him about beating his wife at that time, but that didn't come up.
So set the scene for us then. You have these guys on the Miami City Council, and they're sitting there talking about you when you're not even there, right? And then you're like, you know what? No, because they just said they're going to bring me up at their city council meetings. I'm going to go to the city council meetings, right? And you strike me in that video, in that exchange, as a master of procedure. So what was it that sort of like, you know, were you there to defend your honor? Were you there to throw down? Were you there to, like, you know, make a statement about Women's History Month? Like, what exactly was going on? Because I love procedure as a Washingtonian. I love procedure. I love going to Congress and seeing how procedure gets played back and forth, right? But he obviously wanted to talk and talk and talk, and then he couldn't help himself but to continue his anti-Semitic like attacks against you. And I'm thinking to myself, what you're telling me right now is kind of scary, Billy. I mean, this is an environment where people get their legs blown off just for being a radio host. You're a documentary filmmaker. It's bigger than any radio host in Miami, as far as I'm concerned. I can't name a single radio host in Miami, but I know you, and I've known about you for a long time. So, I mean, like, to me, you're a much bigger threat than any radio host or some cigar shop owner. I mean, we're worried about you, Billy. Like, but what brought you into the room then to stand up for yourself? Like, tell us, set the scene for us.
Well, at that prior meeting that you mentioned, I guess on or about March 11th, Carollo brought me up not once, but like 3 different times during that meeting. Once towards the beginning in the exchange that you referenced, where you referred to me as Billy Cohen, which is my birth name. Actually, William Cohen is my birth name, and he continuously brought that up. I guess to ensure that he identified me as a Jew, and that's important to him because he has obviously a significantly anti-Semitic constituency. There is a base for that. You have to remember that in Miami, it's not just the politicians are a symptom of the voters, of course, who continue to elect these racist, anti-Semitic wife beaters into office, and so. I tweeted about the remarks that you had mentioned about Goodfellas, but actually they were talking about Goodfellas, but then all of their references were out of The Godfather. These are people who don't know what they're talking about, yet make important decisions for the city of Miami, and but yet don't know the difference between Goodfellas and The Godfather, which I feel like in Miami that should be like a baseline, that should be the bare minimum. But they. And so I tweeted that he had talked about me going to the drive-in movie theater and watching Goodfellas with him. And I tweeted that I declined to go on a date with him at a drive-in movie theater. And so in response, I suppose, to my tweet later in the meeting, at the end of the meeting, in fact, the last 9 minutes of the meeting, Joe Carollo spent talking about me, talking about my grandfather, my family, talking about all kinds of crazy nonsense. And then specifically said that he was going, at every future city commission meeting, he was going to have little Billy Cohen time, where he talked about me and my family and our politics and how we make a living and all of this kind of stuff. And so I thought, well, if there's going to be little Billy Cohen time, certainly little Billy Cohen should be able to attend and speak during public comment. So I showed up for public comment. It happened to have been on the day in which the city was honoring National Women's History Month and honoring some of the extraordinary women who have in and around the city of Miami, including the first female mayor of Miami-Dade County in history, who was just elected last November. And honoring various extraordinary women of note here in the community, which I thought was particularly ironic coming from a wife beater,
right.
Which, of course, Joe Carollo was arrested for domestic violence. And so I decided that I think it would be a good time if Joe Carollo wants to talk about me and my family, every meeting, and particularly during National Women's History Month, we should have a conversation in light of the fact that Joe Carollo is running for re-election this year. The voters of the city of Miami need to be reminded about who Joe Carollo is. So I showed up to take my 2 minutes of public comment, which I'm entitled to, and discuss Joe Carollo's record in the city of Miami.
Wow. So and any member of the public can get these 2 minutes.
We should, but what wound up happening is Joe Carollo spent 20 minutes talking about why I couldn't speak for 2 minutes.
Right. And I noticed that, and it seemed like the city attorney was backing him. Like the city attorney was. It seemed like he was backing his play.
In reference to what I mentioned earlier, the city attorney Victoria Mendez is not an attorney; she's a mob lawyer, and even despite the fact that she's one of the highest paid city attorneys in the state, she costs her total compensation package. Okay, that includes her base salary, insurance, car and phone allowance. She costs City of Miami taxpayers nearly $30,000 per month. Okay.
Wow.
This is one of the poorest cities in the country. I think median income is not much higher annually than she costs taxpayers monthly. But instead of protecting and defending the people who pay her salary, she is there as a mob lawyer to protect and defend whatever corrupt shenanigans the mayor, the city commissioners, or the bureaucracy come up with. So instead of protecting the residents and the citizens who pay her handsomely, she protects the corruption in the city. She's a mob lawyer, is what she is, and she charges like a a mob lawyer too. And so basically, she's there protecting unconstitutional behavior, which I believe is not only unconstitutional, I believe it's a violation of the city's own rules, and I believe it's a violation of the state of Florida open government laws. So she's there trying to make excuses, but as you can see, she wasn't very interested in responding to my questions about the legalities of what was happening in that meeting. And as you can see, Ken Russell, who was serving as the chairman of the meeting, has absolutely no control over the meeting whatsoever. But again, if you're interested in moving to Miami and opening a business in Miami and buying a real estate or a home in Miami, you should really see how the government of Miami conducts itself. It's an embarrassment. And I was really trying to raise awareness on that, to hang a lantern, if you will, in City Hall to say, you need to keep an eye on these people, because these are the people that control. We all worry so much about these federal elections and who's running for president, and extremely important, I get it. But it's these local officials who affect our lives on a daily, arguably hourly basis. They make the lights go red and green. They paint the lines on the ground. They collect our trash. They control the police. I mean, these are our daily interactions with government are not with the president, are not necessarily with the federal government. They are with these local officials. And so if you're thinking of coming to Miami, you need to meet Joe Carollo. Okay. You need to understand Victoria Mendez. You need to meet the city manager. I mean, these are dangerous.
And that's just to set up shop. They have to check a box. They basically, if you want to do business in Miami, if you want to buy a piece of real estate or whatever, you got to go kiss the ring. Is that basically what what's at play?
Or worse, if God forbid your business were to have been the location, not even hosted, but if your business was the location of a meet and greet or fundraiser for a candidate that Joe Carollo didn't like or that may have run against him, he will direct his Tonton Macoute in the Miami Police Department, code enforcement, etc. He will unfairly target your business to attempt to crush political speech, in attempt to, as I was saying earlier, back in the day, they would set up bombs, okay, to stifle dissent. Now they just send the police and code enforcement to illegally shut down your legally operating business. So you'd have to be nuts to come into this environment to live in the city of Miami or do business in the city of Miami. You really have to. It's not a safe, stable investment.
Billy, what power does Tallahassee have to intervene in these people? You mentioned, like, obviously not that the president, the federal government doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily present in the day-to-day lives of Miamians the way it obviously is here in Washington, D.C. But Tallahassee, you know, I mean, it's up in a different part of the state and such. Does Joe Carollo have friends up there that are backing him? Like, or is it just as corrupt as what is described, what is laid out so eloquently in 537 votes?
No, in Tallahassee, they don't think much of Miami. They love our money. We are a donor county. Make no mistake. We help subsidize the the goings on in the rest of the state of Florida. There's only a handful of donor counties in the state of amongst Florida's 67 counties, and Miami-Dade certainly is one of the biggest. But beyond that, they kind of let us sort of fight it out down here. They really, I mean, Tallahassee treats Miami much as the CIA did back in the 1960s. We're foreign soil as far as they're concerned. And they just sort of let us duke it out, and they just help basically the Republicans whenever and however they can. But by and large, they try to stay above the fray in Tallahassee. So no, I don't think there's any where you do have backing, though, which is really interesting, is that we have a top cop in Miami-Dade County. And that's the state attorney, the elected state attorney. Catherine Fernandez-Rundle has been the state attorney for 28 years here in this county of Miami-Dade. And in 28 years, she has never charged a law enforcement officer for an on-duty killing ever. And despite over the course of her tenure, mind you, a proliferation of those unfortunate deadly uses of force. She only charged her first police officer for an on-duty shooting a couple of years ago. Fortunately, the man survived. So that's really the problem, is that there is an abdication of responsibility on the part of our top cop to hold public officials accountable. She does not effectively or sufficiently prosecute public corruption, not just police officers, but public corruption in general. And when the person responsible for holding, the top cop responsible for holding people in public office accountable, abdicates that responsibility, we're kind of screwed, because that sends a message of impunity. And that's what we've seen in recent years on the part of politicians in Miami-Dade. They behave with impunity. The only transparency in government in Miami is the transparent corruption. They are much more brazen about it. They almost take that Donald Trumpian tact of, if I was so corrupt, would I be doing it on live TV? When he goes to Lester Holt and he basically confesses, but wait, that can't be a crime because I wouldn't have confessed it if it were a crime. So that's kind of the tactic of these Miami politicians, is like, if it was corrupt to create a $34 million slush fund with a developer who wants to gentrify Little Haiti, would I have announced that I'm doing it? It's like, well, that's corrupt as shit. It happened behind closed doors. There should be a public corruption investigation. We finance, as taxpayers, the prosecutor's office. We finance a public corruption unit. I don't know what the hell they do for that money all day long. I know they're not prosecuting anybody. I don't know if they're investigating anybody. And Catherine Fernandez-Rundle is just deciding not to pursue those prosecutions because, remember, she's an elected official, and and they all it's this big incestuous family of electeds who have to kind of scratch each other's backs, and they donate to each other, and she gets some of them out of trouble, in fact, when they get into trouble. And then it winds up being this situation where they have a very friendly relationship. And so you wind up in what we call the friends and family plan down here in Miami, and you're untouchable.
So, Billy, I got to ask, like, what hope does the Miamian taxpayer have then, if this has been the system down there for for decades, since since midway through the last century at least? What hope does a Miami as a Miami taxpayer, have that their government and that their tax dollars that are going to finance the government aren't just going to be a clown show forever, right? There's not just going to be a crime family after crime family after crime family. Like, what happens when Joe Carollo the third or Joe Carollo the fifth is yelling at Billy Corben the fifth? You know what I mean? Like, is that the trajectory we're looking at here, or is there hope? Is there hope for Miamians?
There is hope. By the time there's a Joe Carollo the fifth, Miami will be underwater.
Okay. Wow. Ouch.
No.
So there really isn't hope then, it sounds like.
I would say there's very little, but what I would say is, if you're looking for potential solutions, as you know, if you're going to begin to solve any problem, you have to acknowledge that there's a problem. And the issue there is there's a lot of people in this community who are vested in the lie, because Miami doesn't really have indigenous industry. We just rely on growth. We sell the dream, right? We sell the sunshine and the water. And the truth is, we have no infrastructure. We have no competent or functional government. We have no sewage system. The water is filthy. There are koi ponds where all the fish are dying in Miami right now, and nobody knows why. That's how toxic it is in Miami. The koi are evidently committing suicide. Nobody knows what the hell is that. But that's how dirty the water is, and that's how ineffectual and corrupt the government is. And so the first thing we have to do is, if you're a realtor, or you're a restaurant owner, or you're in the nightclub business, or you're in, whatever, or you're in construction, your job is to propagate the lie that this is sunshine, lollipops, or lolly propaganda, sunshine, rainbows, and lolly propaganda. That's what it is. And so everything becomes kind of a realty video, like showing off drones of a house. It's all the 360 degree a tour, right? Like that's what it's become, and no one wants to tell the truth. You have contractors and business owners who are getting shaken down by these politicians, but they're petrified to say anything about it to anybody, because they're going to get their businesses shut down by the police or code enforcement. So it isn't a very hopeful situation. I would say the steps are: hang a lantern on your problems, attempt to get the word out like I'm trying to do, and saying, this is where the dysfunction is. Can we work together to do better? And then what we need to do is we need to find good people. We need to recruit them to run for office, and we need to vote for them. And that's the bottom line, is we need to vote better. That's really the long and short of it. Now, in my experience, unfortunately, Democrat or Republican, mind you, you don't change the system changes you. So very often we've seen people that we thought were good people, that we thought were good candidates, that we thought we could believe in, that we support and vote for, who get into office, and the toxicity is so strong. Just if you've ever been in a city hall or a county hall, you have to remember, the constituents are not the voters. What do I mean by that? Other than election season, your elected officials and your government are very rarely interacting with lay people, with the constituents, especially in Miami. Why? Because nearly 60% of Miami-Dade residents can't afford to live in Miami-Dade. Okay? That's from the United Way's Alice report. So basically, we're so busy with our multiple jobs in this town, we have no time to engage with government. Government meetings, Pablo, are at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday or a Thursday or a Tuesday. They don't want us to engage and participate in our government. They deliberately schedule meetings to exclude as many people from the process as possible. So when you go to a government meeting, or you go to City Hall, or you go to Government Center in Miami-Dade County, who is there? The people who are being paid to be there, or the people who can afford to be there. What do I mean by that? Yes, the people in government, lobbyists, lawyers, millionaires, billionaires, business owners who are looking to feed at the public trough, developers, contractors, people who are going to. So what happens is that becomes their constituency, the people that they see every day at their job, not the voters out in the community, not the people who put them in office and need to be protected, But the millionaires, the billionaires, their lobbyists, their lawyers, and the special interests become their constituency, and that is a toxic environment. That changes people. So you need to find people who you hope are not going to fall into that trap once they get elected and wind up in government, and not get sort of intoxicated on these fumes of egomania and money and power, because a lot of people get caught up in that. So, we have to find those people that we believe in and that we can, again, vote better.
So, last question, Billy. I got to ask, are you one of those people? Are you going to run for office? Do you have any plans to run for office in the future?
Well, you know how they say never? I will never run for office.
Okay.
And
why not?
I say that with the utmost confidence, because I think I can be more effective at slowly nudging positive change from the outside rather than from the inside. I'll tell you something very funny that a local elected official, this is from one of the 34 municipalities within Miami-Dade. They were a first-time candidate elected on their first shot, tiny little municipality, and they had a scandal. They had a scandal in this tiny little municipality, a pretty significant nationally publicized scandal, and internationally, in fact, publicized scandal. And they were just dumbstruck. And they, of course, knew about the scandal before it was reported, but they didn't do anything about it until after the Miami Herald broke the story. And what they said to me was, and I'll never forget this, they said, Billy, a lot of times we need to be embarrassed into doing the right thing. And listen, that's the mitzvot that you're doing, Pablo, having these important conversations. I thank you for including me in them, but this is what you have to do. You have to shine a lantern on your problems, have an informed conversation about it, and hopefully, to borrow that phrase, embarrass them into doing the right thing, because our government will see fit to function on our dime, but in the dark and behind closed doors as much as they possibly can. And that is the problem that we have here. We have elected officials and bureaucrats with they have let's say warped priorities and perverse incentives. They measure progress by the number of construction cranes they can count on the horizon and the amount of our tax dollars that they can give in corporate welfare to millionaire and billionaire developers and sports team owners, and perverse incentives. Because remember, they're not negotiating with their money. They're playing with house money. They're playing with our money. So they don't care. They invest millions of dollars in corporate welfare and subsidies to some developer or sports team owner, and they get it back in campaign contributions or donations to their political committees. They get their VIG, they get their commission, they get their kickback one way or another. And so they invest out our money, and then it comes back to them. Can you imagine if we could go out into the world and just negotiate real estate deals and development deals and construction contract with other people's money? I mean,
right.
We would be giving it away. We'd be giving it away. And certainly we'd be giving it to our families and our friends and of course. So that's the problem, is warped priorities and perverse incentives. And and that's what happens when this becomes hereditary. I mean, our founding fathers fled a monarchy. Okay. And to be fair, we were talking about the attraction to autocrats and authoritarians. Even some of the early settlers of the United States, they wanted our first democratically elected president, George Washington, to serve for life. For crying out loud, they fought a war for independence. They had a constitutional convention. They created this extraordinary form of government specifically to avoid a monarchy. And here they were begging for it again. So we have this propensity towards strict father and strong men. I think it's true of unfortunately much of humanity, and we fall into that trap again and again. And so again, I think you're more effective. I think I'm more effective if we are on the outside looking in. If we are pointing out where the defects are, and hopefully try to rally our fellow citizens and voters into remedying them.
I couldn't agree more, and may the blazing spotlight of shame hopefully inspire some humility in these assholes.
Good
because,
luck.
Oh my
Good
God. Billy Corben, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. This has been an awesome conversation. You're welcome back anytime. We look forward to you going right back into your city council meeting, because it's your city council meeting. You know what I mean? They just work for you. We look forward to you going back in there and standing up for yourself. And we want to know from you, from Jordan, from anybody else, when anti-Semitism rears its ugly head from these idiots who have been tormenting you and just tormenting their society too. I mean, this is really interesting. We look forward to Googling people like Mendez. We look forward to Googling some of these names that you found, because this is a really interesting conversation. And obviously, you said at one point, you like to think of yourself as a historian of Miami. I mean, I think the whole world knows that you are the historian of Miami. So thank you for that. Thank you for shining a light on your town. Thank you for coming on Meet La Prensa. You're welcome back anytime. We look forward to having you back. So, viewer, if you like what you see here, please like and subscribe. You can find Billy's Twitter handle right here in the description for this video. Follow him. Follow his work. Watch Cocaine Cowboys. Watch 537 Votes. And yeah, right up there, up top, at Billy Corben. Follow the man. Thank you, Billy. And that's a wrap.